All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started here. This is the intro to the layered earth. So if you're not expecting to see the layered earth, you're in the wrong session. Um, First thing is that
All right,
you.
we'll go ahead and get started here. This is the intro to.
This guy really likes the sound of his own voice.
I love it. It's fantastic. YouTube decided to unmute itself, but we are streaming now, so that's good. The layered earth, you guys will be getting in a couple of weeks after Institute. We'll have all the kinks worked out, and you'll have a version to go along with the full preview suite. So you don't have that yet, but you will be getting it shortly. Just a couple of things. You'll probably see a few weird graphics issues pop up as we're going along. So that's one of the things we're working on. So that out of the way. How many? I assume most of the people here either have layered earth or they're going to be having layered earth when they can get back in their planetariums. Probably, maybe a few people just interested in layered earth.
Yes.
Yeah. Have a lot of you used it before? Or most of you pretty much. I think a lot of you I'm seeing here are people that probably haven't used it very much, if at all. Yeah, great. So what we're going to do for this session is just go over the basics of the layered earth, how to manipulate it, look at the layers, make favorites, that kind of stuff. And then the session after this, we'll look at a few more, not super complicated, but some additional things that you can do, like adding your own layers and things of that nature. So I'm going to get layered earth up on the screen here for you. And what you should be seeing are two very similar looking Earths here. So just like Starry Night, there is a version of the layered Earth that runs on that's designed to run on your Preview machine, and one that's designed to run on your RenderBox machine. So in Preview Suite, I just have them side by side here. So a lot of the time, they're just going to be showing the same thing, which is good. But just keep in mind, the one on the right here is designed to be on the dome. That's why you don't have any kind of user interface, no buttons or whatnot. If you have a side touch with your system, then there are menu options that will appear along the edges of the dome for you to interact with, load favorites, or turn layers on or off with your side touch. So if you do have a side touch on your SideOhm system, take a look through the course notes, and I show you in there how you can duplicate some of the motions and actions that we're going to do. But we have that turned off on Preview Suite. But if you are interested, it is in the course notes. So the layered earth is different than Starry Night in one fundamental way. Starry Night is a digital universe, so it's trying to replicate everything, right? So we can change our location, we can run time forwards and backwards, we can turn things on and off, we can visit other places. So we have all these things that we can do, which makes Starry Night powerful, but also kind of complex. There's a lot going on there that you have to remember. Layered Earth is much simpler. Essentially, it's just a way to view data that's mapped onto the Earth, onto a globe. That's really it. There's no kind of time built into the layered Earth. In the future, we would like there to be, or some form of it. But right now, it's you have the Earth, and then you're putting different data layers or images on top of it. So it could be earthquakes, it could be temperature, it could be tectonic plates, climate, human population density, all these different things, but you're mapping it to the Earth and then analyzing the data, having your students make hypotheses, look at the earthquake data and kind of have the students estimate where they think tectonic plate boundaries are, things like that. So it's more of a way of visualizing data differently, in the dome or on your screen here, than just the students looking in the textbook, and then still using that to go through lessons that you might already have. So it's not nearly as complex as Starry Night, which is why we only have a couple of sessions on it. So as we go along here, hopefully you'll find it, we're not going all over the place of all the different windows that are in Starry Night, just a few things to kind of get under your belt. And then you can spend a lot of time, once you have this on your system, going through all the different data layers that are there on your own. So with that out of the way, manipulating the Earth is fairly straightforward. So I'm going to be working in the pre-flight side over here. And it's just with my mouse cursor, it's a left click, allows me to position the Earth wherever I want. So notice as I drag the Earth around, a little crosshair shows up. And that is the focus of interest, essentially. So like in Starry Night, this is the focus of interest in the layered Earth. So I can just position that anywhere that I want on the Earth's surface. If I use, instead of the left click, right click, that will allow the Earth to pivot on that crosshair. So I can move it, back and forth or side to side. And wherever I've centered that crosshair with the left mouse button, like so, I can now pivot around it with the right mouse button. All right. And then the final one, motion, is zooming in and zooming out, your elevation control. And that's just the mouse wheel. So I zoom in and I zoom out. Get closer. And as we get close, what we should hopefully see is that satellite data starts to come in. If you've been there before, it comes in a little bit faster. If you haven't, you notice that it's actually downloading it in real time here. So, and all the time I've been playing with this, you'll notice that the RenderBox side hasn't been doing anything. It still just has a plain rotating Earth over there. Anyone have an idea why this might be the case? Similar to what we saw in Starry Night. What might I have to do?
Go to a live mode.
A live mode, exactly. So just like Starry Night, you can have pre-flight and RenderBox communicating or not communicating. And the default mode for Layered Earth is that they are not communicating. And so what I would have to do is find the live button, which in Layered Earth is in the same area of the screen as in Starry Night. So it's this little radio antenna looking thing here. I hover over it. It says connect to RenderBox. That is what I want to do. So I do that. And now RenderBox is spinning and animating to where I happen to be on pre-flight. Just like so. So now anything I do on pre-flight, I maneuver it or I back away, RenderBox will eventually, there we go, catch up. Okay. Now you'll notice another difference between Starry Night and Layered Earth here, in that there's a little bit of more of a delay when I do something in Layered Earth than when I did in Starry Night. Like in Starry Night, if you do something on pre-flight, you pretty much immediately see it happen on RenderBox if you're in live mode, right? Layered Earth, there's a little bit of this delay built in so that you can actually do a few different motions at once. And then RenderBox will animate to your final location. So it gives you a little time to, because there's a lot more of manipulating the Earth here than in Starry Night. Starry Night's a lot of, toggles on and offs and just having Starry Night animate you there. Whereas Layered Earth, anytime I move somewhere, it's going to animate that location change. So it has a little bit of a delay built in when I let go of the mouse button to let me kind of get exactly where I want. And then the RenderBox view, the dome view, will animate you there. And so you don't get all those little hops that I did initially to try and get there. All right. And one tip that I do suggest, if you're zoomed in really close to somewhere and you want to, I'm here in Southern Florida, and I want to get somewhere, say further north. Instead of doing what I'm doing right now, like a lot of click and drags, it can be a lot easier to zoom out, do one motion, and then zoom in. Just something I picked up, especially on the dome, or if you have side touch, it can be a lot of click and drags, which can get a little tiring for you, but also for the audience. So even if you're kind of close here, zoom out a little, move, and zoom back in. It can save yourself some trouble. So just a little free tip there. Also, like on Starry Night, there is a home button. I'm gonna fix that little graphical glitch that you probably saw there. It's called Reset in Layered Earth. So if I click on Reset, that's going to, now I haven't turned any layers on, so we don't see any change there, but it takes me to the default position, the home position, which is generally somewhere off the East Coast of the US. We can change that. I'll show you how to change that a little bit later. And then, unlike Starry Night, Layered Earth has just a little bit of a rotation built in, just so it's not a static globe up there. It's a little bit of movement. So, you know, if you're talking, it's kind of in the background. It's just a little bit of something to look at, so it's not too boring up on the dome. But again, I'll show you a little bit later how you can set, you know, the default home location. So if you don't want it rotating or you want it somewhere else on the Earth, then I'll show you how to do that. Okay. Let's see here. I think that's all I want to cover as far as manipulating the Earth. So any questions on that? It's fairly straightforward, I would think. But again, left mouse click to maneuver us around, right click to rotate and pivot, and then mouse wheel to zoom us in. And you notice now that I've been here once, the satellite images pop right up. So,
Although the altimetry is a separate data product from the high resolution satellite image, and it will trickle in as well.
Correct. Now, what you also can notice is I can manipulate just the render box view, right? Which you can actually do in Starry Night a little bit as well. So just be aware kind of that if you do this, which is just fine, you know, if you have side touch especially, you'll find yourself doing this a lot on the dome. Notice that the information, even though I'm in live mode, the information isn't flowing from render box to pre-flight. And this holds true for Starry Night as well. The pre-flight is designed to be the control of the render box side. So if you do find yourself, you know, manipulating stuff either with your side touching in your dome, or you just happen to like manipulating the render box view on your preview suite, if you want to, you know, come back over here and, you know, start turning layers on, or you want to move something around in pre-flight, if I don't sync them back up, what we'll see is as soon as I do something on pre-flight here, render box is going to get all the way back to where I am here, which isn't exactly what I want. So if you are doing something on render box and you want them to match up before you do anything, those are the two little arrows on the top here. So if I hover over, I don't know if it'll pop up now, but one says update from render box, and one is sending the information to render box. So there's probably hard to see on the zoom here, but the middle box here, so there's the live button. The middle box here has the arrow going from the larger screen, the larger rectangle, to the smaller one. And that's meant to emulate taking what's on the dome to your monitor. So that's render box to pre-flight. And the other one is the arrow is going from the little box to the big one. So that's you manually telling pre-flight to update render box. Maybe you're not in live mode or whatever. So I want to update pre-flight from render box. So I'm going to click that one, and you'll notice that now my pre-flight is going so that it matches the render box. Now, if I do something on pre-flight, I'm not going to get any weird effects happening on render box. Not as big of a deal on Preview Suite, much bigger deal when you're, you know, up on the dome and maybe you're going back and forth between using side touch and using the console. So just something to be aware of there.
Does Starry Night have that same capability?
Starry Night does, yeah. Starry Night, there are little circular arrows that are right next to the live button. The home, yeah, right next, there's home, and then under that you have live, and then you have the two little circular arrows. same principle. One is to update from RenderBox, and one is update to RenderBox. So yeah, there are some people that do some shows not in live mode because they want to do a lot of setting things up ahead of, maybe didn't prepare well for the show, or some people just like to do it. You can not be in live mode and set a whole bunch of things up in pre-flight. Maybe you forget exactly where a constellation is or which one you want to show, turn a bunch of them on, find the one that you like, then you tell RenderBox to update, and the audience never sees the kind of interstitial stuff where you're figuring things out. So it's one way of doing things. So
Hey,
that's why
Brad.
we're there. Yes.
I'm sorry, could you show me one more time how you update RenderBox from the dome?
Sure. So I assume you mean pre-flight from the dome?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
Yep, that's fine. Yeah, RenderBox is the computer that controls the dome. So
Okay.
I tend to use RenderBox and dome interchangeably. So sorry if I'm going back and forth.
No, that's okay.
But yeah, so let's just get something really drastically different here. So this would be what the audience is seeing up in the dome, which isn't a bad Earth, right? This is the bottom, the base and front of the dome. And so this would be a decent looking Earth there. So what I'm going to do, and let me just get the word graphics needs to go away. So in the top left, you see where you have the two arrows pointing back and forth. That used to be the antenna button. That back and forth is telling you information is going back and forth between them. So that's your live mode. And right next to that, you have two buttons. One has an arrow pointing to the left, and one has an arrow pointing to the right.
Okay.
The arrow pointing to the left is pointing from a big rectangle to a little rectangle. And so that's your visual cue that that's the button that updates from the dome to your monitor. So from RenderBox to pre-flight. So if I click the middle one here, it actually says get current state from RenderBox. If I hover. So I do that, and now pre-flight is going to match RenderBox.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yep. And then if I click the other one, RenderBox would have updated to match pre-flight. So.
Okay, gotcha.
All right. Any other questions on kind of interacting with the Earth, manipulating it? As Eric mentioned, when we zoomed in, the satellite data and the
Altimetry?
imagery, yes, is a different data set. So if you zoom in and notice it does take a little bit longer on my pre-flight or preview suite than on my actual Sitem system, but it will come in and you'll get the actual mountain topography and everything. So. All right. Oh yeah, if I right click and not drag, almost forgot this, just get a little set of menu options to appear. So one of them is just fly to. So wherever I clicked, it's going to fly me to that location. So kind of like a go there in Starry Night with just as much control. It kind of zooms you in where it wants to put you. So I rarely use that. Honestly, I much rather manipulate the Earth and get myself where I want to go exactly. But another option here is to look north. And what that will do is rotate the Earth so that north is up on your dome. So if you're, this can be really handy, especially if you're zoomed in really far and maybe, you're looking at Mount St. Helens, if we go back to Mount St. Helens there, and you want to know, asking your students, which direction did it erupt? And you've really rotated things around and you want to give them a good idea. If I right click and say, look north, then I've reoriented myself. And so I know exactly, okay, this is where the river is going. This is where the eruption went, that kind of thing. So look north is very useful when you're zoomed in close to the Earth. Two other options we have here, orbit around and rotate around. If I click on rotate around, what that's going to do is just start rotating me around that focus of interest, wherever that crosshairs was, wherever I lined that up. And what you should also notice is that I have a little animation speed window pop up. And so this is where I can set the speed of the rotation, but also the direction. So I can really make the audience sick, or I can make it just, maybe we're above a mountain or some kind of feature, and we want just a little bit of rotation so we can, as you're discussing it, you can see it from different angles. This could be a useful tool to do that. And to stop it, all I have to do is move the Earth a little bit. So as soon as I intervene and somehow manipulate the Earth, whether that's left click and drag, or right click and rotate, or just zoom in or something, as soon as I tell layered Earth I want to be back in control, the rotation stops. And then the other option, orbit around, just takes us into an orbit around the Earth. So from wherever we are, we start going in a great circle around the Earth. And same thing, we have an animation speed pop up here. So you can set the speed and the direction. So this is what you can use if you want to change like your home view of layered Earth. Maybe you don't want any speed, or you want it slower, or you want it going backwards, whatever you want. This could be how you could adjust that initial rotation every time you home the layered Earth. So like if I hit reset, get back to Eastern US, and you'll have that slight rotation. And that's how you can adjust that rotation if you want to. Okay, so let's get into the fun stuff now. I'm just gonna make this big again. All right, so on the left here, we have two windows. The top here are favorites, which hopefully by this point in the week, you at least know what that probably does. Same idea as in Starry Night. So we'll leave favorites alone for now, and we'll take a look at the window that's below it. And these are all of the satellite data layers. Well, not all satellite, but all the different data layers that you have. So with layered Earth, the data layers typically fall into two types. You have the image data layers, so things like temperature or precipitation, tectonic plates, things that are mapping images onto the Earth. And then you have more data set type layers where you're marking all these points. So it could be earthquakes or volcanoes, latitude, longitude, things like that, where they're kind of just overlaid on top of whatever else might happen to be going on. So typically you can have as many of these data set type layers on as you want. So you can have earthquakes on at the same time as you have state boundaries and volcanoes and all these things. Typically, unless the image layer that you're trying to put on, like temperature or something, unless that has some kind of transparency built into it, they're just going to layer on top of each other. So you're only going to see one at a time. So if you try to put on temperature and precipitation at the same time, you're not going to be able to see both of them because they both have some kind of color scheme going, and one's just going to be on top of the other. And so as we go through this, you'll see what I mean. I'll show you some examples there. The way the layers are kind of put together here is kind of what we call the layer tree, where you have all the main branches. So you have satellite imagery, climate, geophysics, topography, and bathymetry. And then each of those you can expand, and they'll have sublayers. And some of those sublayers will also have sublayers. So you kind of drill down until you find the data set, the layer, the information that you want to display, and you turn that on. Turning it on is pretty much the same idea as in Starry Night. You have these little check boxes. So anything that's checked is going to be turned on. But all of the sublayers also have to be turned on. So if I want to see, under climate is temperature, I have the whole climate layer set turned on, but I don't have any of the sublayers turned on. And that's the kind of the default setting where you don't have to worry about turning on the entire data set. You just have to worry about specific sublayers or specific information that you want to display to turn on. So by default, all of these main layers are turned on, and then you just have to expand and find the sublayers that you're interested in. So we'll go through some of these. Obviously not time to go through all of them, as you'll see. The majority of these you actually have on your, you will have on your system. There is a set that's not on here yet. It's called Science on a Sphere. That will be part of Layered Earth on Preview Suite, and it's part of your Cyclone system as well. What you won't see on your Preview Suite version when you get it is the actual data layer displaying on Preview Suite. So the goal is you'll have the option to turn them on, but the information, the data is a lot for Science on a Sphere, and we're already taking up a lot of your hard drive space. So we opted to, for the Science on a Sphere, to make the option available for you to turn it on and save it into a favorite, but you won't actually see the effects of it on your Preview Suite, because otherwise that would be a whole other like 40 gigs or something insane. Eric might remember more precisely, but it's a lot of data, and we opted to not put that onto your Preview Suite. But you do have that on your Cyclone. So what that means is, if you know what that looks like, from having seen it on your Cyclone system, and you're using Preview Suite to set up some favorites, you can turn them on and save it into the favorite, put it, put it onto your Cyclone system, and you'll see it there on the dome. So, all right, so let's take a look first at some satellite imagery here. So not a lot that I typically cover. There are just a few different data sets, satellite images that you can look at. Bing imagery is the important one. If you don't have that one on, so like if I come over here, back to where we were getting the nice high-res stuff from Mount St. Helens, then, oh yeah, spacebar, just like in Starry Night, also works. So if you want to skip the animation, you can always just hit spacebar. But if I turn Bing imagery off here, then I'm no longer using the high resolution data set. So we're actually using what Microsoft uses for Bing Maps. So it's comparable in resolution to what you get from Google Maps. It's just that Microsoft, you just have to pay them money to have access, and Google likes to just own data. So so you have access to the same high resolution that Microsoft has. And you can notice now that I gave it a long enough time, it actually has downloaded the altimetry. So I can actually get into now the caldera of Mount St. Helens. So it is really neat when you have the high resolution data and the altimetry data set combined, because you can get really, really close up and get some neat views. All right, and then there are some alternate imagery data sets. Some of these still work. Some of them, there's a tendency of some of the data sets just to be turned off. Like someone decides they're not going to update it anymore. NASA has been very, very annoying. We had access to the Bing imagery through NASA, and then they decided they were just going to shut off their servers like early this year.
I think it was early last year.
Oh, no, it was last. Yeah, COVID times. Yeah. Go ahead.
Unsurprisingly, we were not the only people who'd been using that feature in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So first they delayed it, and then other actions were taken to reduce the impact of that decision.
Yeah, the satellite data we worked around to get it from somewhere else, but the altimetry was the important stuff. They just gave everybody like I think it was 2 months notice of, hey, we're just gonna not stop updating these, but shutting these servers down. To which everyone was like, okay. And then they did, and then they turned them back on. And then I think the website for that group, I haven't checked it in several months, Eric, maybe you have. But the last time I checked, which was 6 months ago, it was the same as 6 months prior to that, which was stay tuned for more information.
See.
So yeah. So some of these might work. If they don't, let us know. But that might mean that they're constantly changing. So that's why we have like the main one, the Bing imagery is the one you're going to be using the most. That gives you the nice high resolution satellite data. Atmosphere. Zoom out a little. So the default atmosphere is just kind of a nice little shaded, give you a hint that yes, there's an atmosphere that we breathe here on the Earth. If you want to, you can just turn that off. It can be a little distracting depending on what topic you're trying to teach. So if you want to just ignore the atmosphere entirely, you just turn it off like that. If you want just a little hint of a atmosphere, you can turn that on. It's not as obscuring. It's not as bright compared to the other data layers that you might put up there. Clouds, you can turn that on. It should reach out and get the most recent satellite coverage. And there is a known issue where RenderBox sometimes just takes forever to update. But if I force it to match pre-flight, then it will. So looking and tracking this one down. But if you do want to look at the clouds, the current satellite layer, just turn it on and then force RenderBox to, no, really, I do want to see it. So I'm going to turn clouds off. And then,
I was actually in the other window for a second there, but those are real clouds. Those are today's clouds, aren't they?
They are, yeah. Yeah, it's up to date.
It's hurricane season.
Yes, it is. And then 3D atmosphere just gives you a very simple conic representation of the actual atmosphere. So by default, it places it down here in South America. You notice here that there's to the right a box that says settings. That is the layered Earth equivalent of hovering over an option in Starry Night and the text turning blue. It's telling you there are some settings, some properties that you can adjust pertaining to whatever this data layer is. So I'll bring this down here so it's a little easier to see. So we can set basically where we want it, latitude, longitude, and the size of it. So I can move it further south, north, east, west, and then make it bigger, smaller, pinpoint, whatever I want. And then just a basic control of, what layers of the atmosphere do we want to see. So if we want to turn off the exosphere so that it's not dominating, then we can get a little bit closer and see the other layers. And just like Starry Night, the data layer here hasn't updated on RenderBox and won't until I close that window. All right, so just a little thing about having to do with the 3D atmosphere. So you can kind of blow students' minds away with how far out into space the atmosphere actually goes. Guidelines and names. This is going to be where you can throw the latitude, longitude up there, political boundaries, tropics, Arctic circle, Antarctic circle. So if I turn latitude, longitude on, it pops up there. And then the further in that we zoom, the closer to the Earth we get, we start getting more, start getting finer resolution of latitude, longitude if the RenderBox will decide it wants to catch up here. So just a little latitude, longitude information you can get in there. Zoom back out, and just other, just little, important lines that you can throw onto the Earth. So we can put the equator and put the tropics, things like that. The international date line, notice that it has a little marker here that tells you that there are sublayers. You can display the international date line over time. So we have, before 1845, when it basically was, off the coast of continents and main islands. And then we can go a little bit further forward. And now that, we're aware of the Americas, Russia owns Alaska, we own Alaska, and so on. So you can kind of see how this has adapted mainly due originally due to new discoveries, but after that, it's just all politics. Especially from this point on, it's just little wiggles back and forth of who wants to be first and who wants to be last and stuff like that. So have a little bit of fun with that. And then the final thing that I'll point out here are place names. And this is going to label, when I'm far away like this, it's going to be labeling, continents. If I've zoomed into an area, it starts downloading additional place names. So if I come over, forget if I on this system, yeah, I've zoomed in a little bit here. So we get major cities popping up. And depending on how far you go in, it does, it's downloading this. I forget where exactly it's downloading this information from. Eric might know. But it gets to the point, like if you zoom in on a city, I've seen it get like park names and school names and stuff. So it can get really, really detailed. So this can be very useful if you're trying to find somewhere specific, like you've zoomed into your town or your city, and you're not used to looking at the satellite version, you're used to looking at like the standard Google Maps version. Popping up place names can be very helpful in finding out where you are.
I thought that the place names engine might have been another part of NASA Whirlwind.
You are correct, I think, yeah. All right. So just a little bit more here, a few more layers. Climate is everything to do with the climate. So we want to take a look at temperature. I could just turn that layer on, and what it gives me by default, if I expand that under maps, is an annual average. So I get the scale legend off to the side there, and it is a map that covers all of the land area on the Earth. All right. And so what this means then is if I want to turn on precipitation now, notice how precipitation is overlaying on top of the land temperature. So I can't display both of those at the same time. And as a general rule of thumb, the further down in the list a layer is, the higher the hierarchy it has. So precipitation, notice, is on top of temperature. So then, other layers further down would be on top of precipitation. Typically how that works there. For temperature, if instead of annual, I want to say, month by month, I could go, January, February, March, and so on. Now, since the temperature here is only covering the land area, I can go to sea surface temperature, that's what the SST stands for, and turn that on. And now, since there are images overlaying different parts of the Earth, I can actually have both of those up and visible at the same time. So I could, if I wanted to, go month by month, make a favorite for each month, and we have kind of, averages for that month of the land temperature and the sea temperature. So you could do a little lesson on, northern hemisphere versus southern hemisphere. Does one warm up faster, cool down faster, land versus water, that kind of stuff. And you can go month by month if you wanted to. And then some other, other things that you can play with: ozone, surface winds, water vapor. Earthquakes is always a fun one. So these are going to be data points drawn on there. So if I wanted to, I could actually keep, say, temperature drawn there. And if I turn on historical earthquakes, those are going to be overlaid, on top of them. They're just drawing them as points. So I don't know why exactly you might have temperature up at the same time as the earthquakes, but I'm going to turn the temperature off by just turning the entire climate layer off. So temperature is still turned on, but I made it easy on myself and I just turned the entire group off, which makes it easy for myself later. If I want to turn it on, all I have to do is turn the entire group on. I don't have to expand climate, find temperature, and turn it back on. I have it set up in the sublayers so that all I have to do is turn that main layer on. So very similar to Starry Night when we were talking about saving favorites. And if you could set some of the options up ahead of time, even though you don't see their effect, like if when you turn constellations on, you want the illustration to show up, you could set that ahead of time and save that into your favorite. So that all you have to do is turn your constellation on and it shows the same, exactly the way you want to. Same way for layered Earth here. So I just turn the entire climate data set off, entire group off. And now to turn the temperature back on, I just have to turn the climate on. So earthquakes, you can hover over it and it'll tell you when it happened, the magnitude, and the depth. And they're also color-coded for depth. So the red ones are on the surface, yellow ones are, I don't know, a couple hundred kilometers down. And then the green ones, you're getting 500, 600 kilometers down below the surface. And if you haven't seen it before, they're also drawn three-dimensionally. So if I get down here and kind of rotate the Earth back and forth, you can see the earthquakes as they get deeper, they slide off to the left here. So you get not just where they are two-dimensionally, but you get a three-dimensional representation, which can take students to the point of not just mapping out where the plate boundaries are, but what type of boundary is it? Are they subducting? Are they sliding by? Is the oceanic plate, what's it doing compared to the continental plate? That kind of stuff. So, and then if we wanted, we could actually take a look at plate tectonics and, oh, not that one. Just turn on tectonic plates and see how well the two data sets match up. So the historical earthquakes go back to the year 1900, if I recall correctly. And you'll notice that they have a little settings to the right there. So I bring that up. We can set, right now we're just showing the earthquakes from the 70s, but we could go all the way to 1900 if we wanted, the magnitude range and the depth. So you can kind of limit what types of earthquakes you're looking at. So if you only want to look at deep earthquakes or certain magnitudes or a certain date range, you have that option. And then the really fun one is the 7-day earthquake data. So I turn that on, go and turn tectonic plates off. All the earthquakes you're going to see now are earthquakes that have happened within the last week. And so for the historical earthquakes, you probably noticed that the magnitude range stopped at around 5.5. And that's just because we showed every third, fourth, second magnitude earthquake, the system would crash. So we were limited in historical earthquakes, but for recent earthquakes, we can get much lower magnitudes. So somewhere on here we go. Here's some activity going on up in Alaska. And the flashing one is going to be the most recent earthquake there. And it's probably today. Yeah.
Yeah, it was, they had a big 7.8 there, I think, yesterday morning.
Which would make sense why we're seeing all the aftershocks there. So yeah, this can be a really fun layer to just kind of go back to every once in a while. All right. So just for time's sake here, that's basically how the layers work. So you either have images that you're overlaying, or you have data points or lines or whatnot that you can put on top of it. And saving a favorite is very simple. I get the look that I want. So let's say I want to do the earthquakes. And Central America there. And you just go to File, Save As. You can choose a folder or just save it directly into favorites. And I'll just say Central Earthquakes. If you want a folder, I can just right-click anywhere here and say New Folder. And Sample Favorites. And then just like in Starry Night, although it's a little harder with the interface looking like this, little glitches, you can drag and drop into folders, just like that. And then when I load a favorite, what you'll notice with Layered Earth is the layers change right away, right? It switched to this, this is elevation. So basically the areas on the Earth that are in danger of flooding if the water level rises. So the data layers switched right away. And then we animate to the new location. So when Scott was talking about like the trips and traveling around in Starry Night, the new way of doing things, this is what he was referring to when he said the way that Layered Earth handles this. The animation is just built in to the favorites. You just automatically animate from one favorite to the next. So you wanted to fly a specific path, you just set up favorites at key points along that path, and then just load them one after the other, and Layered Earth would follow that path for you.
Okay, we have a hand up from Nate Fairchild, and there's
Yeah.
also a question in the chat room.
Nate, go ahead.
A question about favorites, and I think I know the answer and I won't like it. I've got a mess in my favorites in Starry Night. I've got favorites not in the folders where I'd like to put them, but my fear is if I move them into the correct folders that it will no longer link properly to my ATM4 shows. Is that correct?
That would
Yeah,
be
if
correct.
your ATM4 is looking at a specific favorite, it is looking at the location. So yeah, if you move it, then you'll have to redo
Got to
your-
recreate it and rematch it up. Okay.
Yep.
Thought so.
Yeah, sorry about that.
I want you to fix everything.
Never heard that before. So yeah, so favorites is they behave exactly the same way as in Starry Night. So last thing I will show you here, I think. Like I said, I don't have time to go through all of the layers here. Do that on your own time when you have it in Preview Suite. But if we want to change the kind of the home location here, so let's say I want it more, central US, and I don't want it spinning. I get the Earth looking the way that I want, and then it's just File and Save as Default. And now, if I reset, I come back there. So just like in Starry Night, you set it up the way that you like and save that as default. And it can also adjust how your the layers are. So if you want some layers turned on, or you always want a layer turned, maybe you want the different atmosphere by default, it will do the same thing as that. So it'll change your default settings for these as well. Let me just glance through my notes. Eric, anything obvious that you think I missed?
Paul was asking about Yellowstone.
What about Yellowstone?
We have 1 hour of TLE Beyond the Basics, and I imagine that's when we'll start talking about things like drawing polygons. I think
Yeah.
Paul would just like to see Yellowstone without having to actually drive out there.
We can definitely take a look at Yellowstone. If you're going to be in the next session, Paul, we can start that one out, or just hang out here for a little bit. We can zoom into Yellowstone if you want.
We've already discussed that TLE works better in a show environment if you're taking it to a place that you have already visited, because then the squares will already be there.
Yeah.
If you have to find somebody's birthplace and you've never visited that location before and show it on the dome, it will lag while it's downloading the altimetry and the high resolution satellite imagery.
Yeah, Eric brings up a good point. When you're making your shows, it doesn't really matter as much for Preview Suite as it does for your actual SciDome, but you do want to go to the places ahead of time so that the system has time to download. And what it does is it reaches out to the server the first time you go, and it downloads what it needs, but then it stores it locally. Your SciDome systems have a 3 terabyte drive in there just for Layered Earth satellite and altimetry data. If you fill that up, let me know. I don't think I've ever had someone say they actually filled that up, but that's what it's for. And so when you go there ahead of time, just give it time to download all that. And then the next time you go there, like you saw when I went back to Mount St. Helens, they just popped right in. So I think I saw, Rick, go ahead. Did you have a question, Rick? I'm just not seeing.
Sorry, I was holding down my space bar. It wasn't working.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
If you have the, let's say, 7 days of earthquakes
Yes.
and you save that as a favorite, when you click on that favorite, let's say a month later, does it bring up what you had the month before when you saved it, or what the current 7 days of earthquakes would be?
What it will likely do is briefly bring up what it looked like when you saved it. But what it's doing is then behind the scenes reaching out and updating to the current. Right. So that's that. You're not the first person to ask that. It's a feature that I would kind of like to look at doing for some of the real-time layers of being able to save the current state and not have it kind of update automatically when you load that favorite. So hopefully, you know, at some point we'll get an update to Layered Earth that will do that. So what you will probably see is during the save process, some like toggle box of, you know, save static, or don't update on load, or something like that to make it obvious what it would do. But currently, yeah, if I were to save this and then load it tomorrow, the most recent earthquake is going to move. So good question though. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop this now. Does anyone know? I don't have the schedule in front of me. Is this the same room? I assume it probably is.
Yes, yes, it is.
Okay. Thank you, Eric. So I'm just going to stop my screen share and give you guys time to take a break. And then we'll be back here in, a little after 12.